Hello, and welcome to Safe and Sound, a podcast from the Canadian Centre for Occupational Health and Safety. Every April, in preparation for the Day of Mourning, we invite a guest from Threads of Life to come on the podcast and share their story of how a workplace tragedy has impacted their life. The National Day of Mourning, marked in Canada each April 28th, is dedicated to remembering those who've lost their lives, suffered injury or illness on the job, or experienced a work-related tragedy. Threads of Life is a Canadian charity dedicated to supporting families after workplace fatalities, sorry, I'm going to take that one more time. Threads of Life is a Canadian charity dedicated to supporting families after workplace fatalities, life-altering injuries, or occupational disease. We're joined today by Ambassador Jessica Blackie Gillis to learn about her brother Skylar and how Threads of Life was able to support her family. Thank you so much for being here, Jessica.
Thank you for having me.
Tell us about your brother Skylar. What were some of the things he loved, and what kind of work did he do?
It sounds so cliche, and I hate to start on a cliche, but Skylar was just one of those people who filled a room the second he walked into it. He had this bright smile and a natural confidence that just made people gravitate towards him. And I have to say, one of the most annoying things about him as a younger brother was that in high school, I was known as Skylar's sister, not the other way around, which it typically would be. So I think that speaks a lot about
Amazing.
him. He was kind of the quintessential middle child. He definitely knew how to stir the pot. He absolutely knew how to push all of my buttons as his big sister. But at the same time, he was one of the kindest, most generous people I've ever known. And actually, one of his firefighting brothers told a story at his funeral about how they were both testing for the same job within the fire service. And he was struggling to finish one of the tasks. And even though they were technically competing against each other, Skylar was standing there cheering him on as loud as he could. And that just really sums up who he was. He loved being a part of his community and he loved being around kids, probably because he was a big kid himself. He worked at one of our local community centers as a counselor and a lifeguard through his teen years. And we actually worked at rival community centers. So it was an ongoing
Oh,
sibling
amazing.
competition every summer of whose summer camp was better. Um, and honestly, I could talk about my brother all day, but more than anything, he loved helping people. And from a really young age, he knew he was going to be a firefighter. And once he decided that, there really wasn't a backup plan in his mind. And although my parents did make him have a backup plan, he attended the community college for an HVAC course.
Oh,
But
nice.
firefighting for him
Yeah.
was always the goal. He was going to be a firefighter. The minute he turned 18, he signed up to be a volunteer. He worked incredibly hard, and then eventually he became a full-time career firefighter in Truro, Nova Scotia, and he spent the last 10 years of his life doing what he loved. First as a volunteer, the last 6 years as a career firefighter, and it was never just a job for him. It was truly who he was.
Amazing. He sounds like an amazing guy who really just knew what he wanted from the hop, right?
Yes.
And yeah, as a sister myself, I can relate. I had a similar kind of relationship with my brother. Tell us about the day that Skylar didn't come home from training.
So that day, it started out completely ordinary. So to kind of set the scene, I was very pregnant with my second child. I was out shopping with my almost 4-year-old daughter for some baby things, getting ready. My husband was working overtime. My parents were getting ready to leave for Florida later that day. And then my two younger brothers were both at the Nova Scotia Firefighter School completing a certification exam. So it was just like a normal Saturday. While I was out shopping, I called my mom for her opinion on something. She didn't answer, which wasn't unusual. So then I called my dad, and he picked up, and his voice just sounded off. He sounded a little agitated, um, and he said that there had been an accident during training, and they were heading to the hospital. At first, I really didn't think it was anything serious. Skylar had a bit of a history with minor injuries. Um, It sounds so odd, but my first thought was, oh my goodness, did he like lose his toe for real this time? Because he'd almost lost his toe twice before.
Oh my gosh.
um, so yeah, um, so after that, sorry, I called my husband to let him know that what I had heard. He offered to come home early, and I kind of just laughed it off. And I said, no, honestly, like I just hope mom and dad can still catch their flight tonight. And that's honestly like how little I thought of it at that time. So my daughter and I headed home, and I got updates at first, but then they stopped coming. And as that time kept ticking by with no updates, and I started getting this like sinking feeling in my chest. And a couple hours after that, my husband walked through the front door hours earlier than I was expecting to see him, which just completely threw me off. And he told me that my mom had called, and he didn't want me to be home alone, or for me to be home alone with our daughter panicking. And she had asked him to bring me to the hospital. And it was in that moment that I knew. Um, I was almost full term, and it was cold. Sorry, I'm going to take that
That's
again.
okay. No, take your time.
I was almost full term. It was cold and flu season, so no one was going to ask me to come to the hospital unless it was to say goodbye. So Skylar had been injured during a live fire training exercise. He was asked to choose a fire extinguisher from a line of different types. Um, and it just so happened that the proper one, the one he was supposed to choose, um, had never been inspected. It was donated by a local refinery that had shut down. And when the school received it, they never inspected it, they never serviced it, and it made it out into the field. He even pointed out to the instructor that there was rust on it before, and he was told it was safe to use. And that's in the court documents as the agreed statement of facts. So when he released the valve, it exploded. The blast struck him in the face and caused catastrophic brain damage. So investigations later determined that that equipment had never been maintained the way it should have, and that the school as an entirety had a lot of safety failures. And my younger brother was there that day as well, and he heard that explosion. He tried to go to his brother, and other firefighters had to physically hold him back because he couldn't be the one to work on his own brother.
Of course.
After that, we spent 10 days in the ICU, hoping for a miracle that never came. And on March 20th of 2019, he passed away from his injuries. And that was kind of the day that our life was split into before and after.
I'm so sorry, and thank you. I can imagine, and I can only imagine how difficult it must be to relive that day. But thank you for sharing it with us and with our listeners. Tell us a little bit about how you came to be involved with Threads of Life and how they provided support.
Yeah, so that day that he passed, I remember walking outside the hospital that morning. Uh, it happened to be the first day of spring, and it was one of those beautiful, warm, sunny days. And I remember just standing there outside the hospital, looking around and feeling this overwhelming awareness that the world was moving on as if nothing had happened. There was people driving by, there was people walking by, going to work, talking, laughing, and no one around knew that our world had just stopped and changed forever. Um, and that's one of the strangest parts of grief for me, is that realizing that even when your world stops, the world doesn't stop. But also at the same time, my life didn't get to pause. Less than a month after Skylar's funeral, I gave birth to my second daughter, Vera Sky, who was named after him.
Beautiful.
And so I live in this space where I was grieving one of the biggest losses of my life while also experiencing one of the greatest joys. And it just felt like I was living two lives at once, one filled with love and new beginnings, and another that was just permanently marked by loss. Um, and in those early months, I remember feeling like our family was carrying something that most people around us couldn't fully understand. And that eventually led us to Threads of Life. And so what they do is connect families who have experienced workplace tragedy with other families who understand that kind of loss. They offer peer support, community, and a space where you don't have to explain why certain dates are hard or why grief just never disappears. And just as importantly, they work on prevention. So they bring these stories into workplaces and classrooms so that people understand that safety decisions aren't abstract. They affect real people and real families. So for me,
Absolutely.
being involved with Threads of Life helped me realize that telling Skylar's story, it wasn't just about looking back. It actually was going to be a way to honor him and hopefully protect someone else, this happening from somebody else.
It's beautiful. If you could give our listeners one piece of advice about workplace safety, what would that be?
If I could give one piece of advice, it would be to never ignore that inner voice that tells you when something isn't right. Workplace tragedies usually aren't the result of like one reckless decision. They're often the result of a lot of small things. A shortcut that might feel harmless that day, a piece of equipment that hasn't been checked properly, a concern that just kind of gets brushed aside because everyone is assuming it's just going to be fine. Um, in Skylar's case, he pointed out the rust on the extinguisher, but he trusted the system, that it was safe, that it had been checked. We all just assume tragedies happen somewhere else to somebody else. I know I certainly thought that. So my advice is just simply, if something feels off, ask questions, double check, speak up, even if it's uncomfortable, even if you're the newest person in the room, because safety culture isn't built in big moments, it's built in small decisions over and over again. And those decisions are what make sure people go home to their families at the end of the day.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for sharing that with us. And really, like nothing brings into sharper focus the importance of the work that we do here at the center than hearing from families like yours and focusing on prevention and safety culture. Is there anything else you'd like our audience to know before we wrap up?
I think the biggest thing that I'd want people to understand is that when someone dies in a workplace incident, it doesn't just affect one person. It changes an entire network of lives, from parents and siblings, spouses, children, friends, coworkers, um, to the outside world. You know, my life probably looks very whole. I have a husband, I have 4 kids, a career, a home, um, but there's always an empty chair. Um, there are so many milestones that he's missed and will continue to miss. Um, 3 of my 4 children will only know him through stories. Um, and so I kind of live what feels like a parallel life, especially as a sibling of loss. It can kind of sometimes get forgotten. And he was somebody who should have been here for all these big life milestones. Um,
Absolutely.
and that's what people don't always see when they hear about the workplace tragedy. They see a headline. My family, we lived the aftermath. And my brother was a hero in real life. Firefighters are heroes. And my hope is that by sharing his story, he'll continue to be a hero by helping prevent another family from getting that phone call.
Jessica, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your story and Skylar's. And we hope that it helps families across Canada to empathize, understand that they're not alone, and to focus on prevention and safety in the workplace. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.